First of all, welcome, dear listeners, to another interesting and thoughtful episode of the English Globe. I'm Adam, and I'm so happy you're joining us today. Whether you're listening from a busy city or a quiet village, we're here to take you on a journey through time. Today, we will explore one of the most powerful and fascinating empires in history, the Roman Empire, and how it came to a tragic and unforgettable fall.
Hello everyone, I'm Julia, and thank you for tuning in. We truly appreciate your support. If you enjoy our podcast, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the English Globe. And please, tell us in the comments where you're listening from. We love hearing from our global audience. Also, feel free to share your opinion about today's topic, the fall of the Roman Empire, a world lost in time. Now, let's begin our historical journey.
Before we dive into the fall, let's first understand what made Rome so great. The Roman Empire wasn't built in a day. It grew over centuries, rising from a small town on the banks of the Tiber River in modern-day Italy. By the 1st century AD, Rome ruled over Europe, parts of Africa, and Asia. It became the center of trade, politics, war, art, and culture. It was an empire unlike any the world had ever seen before.
Exactly, Adam. At its height, the Roman Empire was home to more than 60 million people. Roman roads connected distant lands, allowing soldiers, merchants, and messengers to travel quickly. The city of Rome itself was massive, filled with temples, theatres, markets, and grand buildings. It was a symbol of power and pride. People from many different regions and cultures lived under Roman rule, but they were all part of one great system.
The Roman military was one of the most powerful forces in the ancient world. Roman legions were well-trained, disciplined, and loyal. They protected the empire's borders and expanded its territory. Roman law and order helped keep peace across the vast lands. For nearly 2 centuries, during a time called Pax Romana, or Roman peace, people lived under a relatively stable and peaceful rule.
The Romans were also excellent builders. They created aqueducts to carry fresh water, and their roads were so well made that many still exist today. They built grand arenas like the Colosseum, where thousands of people gathered to watch games and shows. Their cities had advanced sewer systems and public baths. Even today, many of our modern ideas in law, government, and architecture come from the Romans.
But while the empire looked strong on the outside, cracks were beginning to form inside. In future parts of this podcast, we'll look at those cracks more closely. But for now, just imagine a world where everything seemed perfect: roads, laws, armies, and buildings. Yet underneath it all, there were problems slowly growing. The story of the Roman Empire is not just a story of power. It's also a story of pride, mistakes, and lessons that are still important for us today.
That's right. When we look at the Roman Empire, we see the rise of a mighty civilization. But we also see human weakness, greed, and division. So today we're not just studying history, we're learning from it. What caused the fall of such a strong and intelligent society? Why did it all collapse? And could something like that happen again in the modern world?
Great questions, Julia. And that's what we're here to explore with you, step by step. So again, dear listeners, if you're enjoying this episode, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next part of this powerful story. Also, we'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. Where are you listening from? And what do you already know about the Roman Empire?
Whether you're a student, a history lover, or someone who simply wants to practice English, we're so happy to have you with us. And don't worry, we'll use clear and simple language all throughout the podcast. Our goal is to make learning both easy and enjoyable. Now let's get ready to move forward, because the rise of Rome is only the beginning of this epic tale.
In the next section, we'll take you deeper into the heart of the Roman Empire at its greatest moment. We'll show you what life was like during its golden age, when Rome truly ruled the world. So stay with us, and let's continue this journey through time together. Now, let's go deeper into what made the Roman Empire so powerful during its golden age. This was a time when the empire stood strong and proud. Rome was the center of everything: politics, trade, culture, and military strength. Its laws were respected, its armies feared, and its cities filled with life. From Britain to Egypt, millions of people lived under Roman rule, sharing in the structure and peace that Rome offered.
Life inside the empire was organized and well managed. Roads stretched across mountains and deserts, connecting faraway provinces to Rome. These roads allowed soldiers to travel fast, messages to be sent quickly, and trade to grow. Ships sailed across the Mediterranean Sea every day, carrying olive oil, grain, wine, glass, silk, spices, and gold. Roman engineers made travel and business easier than ever before.
The city of Rome itself was a wonder. It had grand marble temples, huge amphitheaters like the Colosseum, public baths, fountains, and even apartment buildings. The Romans were master builders. Their aqueducts brought clean water from miles away. Their roads were straight, strong, and long-lasting. Even today, some of them still exist. Roman cities had sewer systems and running water, things that disappeared for centuries after the empire fell.
And Rome wasn't just about buildings and roads. The Roman government was highly developed for its time. There was a senate, laws written on stone, and systems for collecting taxes, managing provinces, and protecting borders. While not everyone was treated equally, Roman citizenship gave certain rights and privileges. Over time, many people outside Italy were given Roman citizenship as well.
Roman law became one of its most important contributions to the world. It shaped the legal systems of many modern countries. The idea that people should be treated equally under the law came from Roman thinking. They had written codes, judges, and legal debates. Their court system helped solve problems without violence. Even in chaos, Roman law brought a sense of order and fairness, at least in theory.
The Roman army was another key reason for the empire's strength. Roman legions were well-trained, well-armed, and loyal to the emperor. They protected the empire's borders and kept peace inside the provinces. A Roman soldier known as a legionary could march for days, build bridges, fight battles, and still follow orders. Discipline and strength were the core of the Roman military system.
Roman society also had a deep appreciation for learning and art. Wealthy Roman families hired Greek tutors to teach their children philosophy, mathematics, and history. Writers like Virgil and Cicero filled libraries with poems and speeches. Sculptors made lifelike statues of emperors and gods. Architects designed buildings with perfect symmetry. Every part of Roman life aimed to show power, beauty, and control.
Religion in the empire was complex. Romans believed in many gods: Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and more. Temples stood in every city. Emperors were often honored like gods themselves. But over time, new beliefs entered the empire. One of these was Christianity. It began in the eastern part of the empire and slowly grew, even when it was banned. Eventually, it became the official religion of Rome.
This period is often called the Pax Romana, which means Roman peace. For around 200 years, from the rule of Augustus to Marcus Aurelius, there were no major civil wars. Trade was safe, cities were growing, people felt secure. This was the height of Roman power. It seemed that nothing could challenge Rome. But deep underneath this golden age, small cracks were beginning to form.
People were starting to feel the weight of taxes. Some emperors became too powerful or too selfish. Poor farmers were losing their land. Slavery, which powered much of the economy, created a society where only a few were truly free. While the empire looked strong on the outside, it was slowly becoming weaker inside. Many problems were hidden beneath the surface, waiting to explode.
It's important to remember that great empires often fall not because of one big event, but because of many small ones over time. That's what began to happen to Rome. Its size made it hard to manage. Its leaders were not always wise, and enemies outside the borders were watching closely, waiting for a chance to strike. The seeds of decline had already been planted.
Still, the legacy of Rome during this peak period cannot be denied. The culture, the law, the roads, and the buildings still influence us today. If you've ever been to a city with straight roads, a public court, or a dome-shaped building, you've seen Rome's legacy. They truly believed they were building something eternal. In a way, they were right, because their ideas still live on.
So, dear listeners, the Roman Empire at its peak was more than just a land of power. It was a symbol of what humans can build when they are united and driven. But no empire is perfect, and even Rome, with all its greatness, could not avoid the forces of change. In the next part of our podcast, we will talk about those early signs of trouble, the hidden causes of Rome's slow decline.
We're excited to take you deeper into that story, but before we move on, we want to know what you think. What part of Roman life during its peak sounds the most amazing to you? The architecture, the law, the powerful army, or the peaceful trade routes? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the English Globe for more thoughtful history in simple English.
Your support helps us continue bringing the past to life for English learners around the world. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this story, a turning point in history that would begin to shake the very foundations of Rome. Until then, keep learning, stay curious, and remember, history has many lessons to offer.
Now that we've seen how powerful and advanced the Roman Empire became, it's time to look deeper, beneath the surface. Because even while Rome seemed strong, wealthy, and well-organized, problems had already started to grow. These problems weren't always visible to the people living at the time. They developed slowly, like small cracks in a large wall. At first, no one paid much attention, but over time, they became impossible to ignore.
One of the first signs of trouble came from the empire's size. Rome had expanded so far, so fast, that it became difficult to control. From Britain in the west to Syria in the east, the empire stretched thousands of kilometers. Managing taxes, military, food supplies, and local laws across such a huge space became more complicated with each passing year. Governors in distant provinces started acting more like independent rulers.
Communication was also a challenge. Even with their excellent roads, messages could take weeks to arrive. If there was a rebellion in one region or an invasion in another, the emperor might not hear about it until it was too late. And sometimes, local leaders would solve problems their own way, even if it meant ignoring orders from Rome. This lack of control weakened the unity that once held the empire together.
Another major issue was economic trouble. At first, the Roman economy was strong. It was built on farming, trade, and labor, much of it done by slaves. But over time, things changed. Wars became more frequent, and the empire spent huge amounts of money on weapons, soldiers, and defense. To pay for this, the government raised taxes again and again. Farmers and small business owners began to suffer under the heavy tax burden.
The use of slaves was also a long-term problem. Because slave labor was cheap and easy to get, many Roman landowners didn't invest in new farming tools or better methods. When fewer slaves were available, especially after military defeats, agricultural productivity dropped. This caused food shortages and price increases. The empire became less self-sufficient and more vulnerable to crisis.
Inflation became a serious issue. The government started producing more coins, but with less silver and gold in them. These coins lost value quickly. People no longer trusted Roman money, and trade suffered. In some parts of the empire, people went back to bartering goods instead of using currency. This made daily life harder and created even more economic instability. Confidence in the empire's leadership was beginning to fade.
Leadership itself was another source of growing instability. After Emperor Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD, his son Commodus took the throne. Unlike his father, Commodus was selfish, unpredictable, and dangerous. His rule marked the start of a long period of poor leadership. Over the next 100 years, the empire saw more than 25 emperors, many of whom were assassinated or overthrown in military coups.
The frequent change of emperors created chaos. Generals and politicians fought for power, and armies began supporting their own candidates for emperor. This was known as the crisis of the 3rd century. Rome was no longer ruled by careful planning or wise decision-making. Instead, it was controlled by whoever could gain the army's loyalty, often through money or threats. Corruption and fear replaced order and justice.
This political chaos made it hard to respond to real dangers. Invasions from outside enemies were increasing, but the empire was too busy fighting itself. Local revolts broke out in various provinces. Cities were destroyed, and people fled their homes. Trust in the Roman government fell. Ordinary citizens began to feel unprotected and forgotten, while the elites in Rome enjoyed luxury and comfort.
The growing gap between rich and poor also added to the problem. While wealthy Roman families lived in large houses with servants and fine food, many others struggled to survive. Farmers lost their land and moved to cities, hoping for work. But the cities were overcrowded and dirty. Jobs were scarce, and crime was rising. The government tried to provide food and entertainment, but this only delayed the bigger issues.
Over time, people's attitudes began to change. In the early days, Romans were proud of their empire. They believed in hard work, discipline, and loyalty to the state. But by the 3rd century, many had lost that sense of pride. Instead, they focused on personal wealth and pleasure. The culture of service and duty was replaced by one of selfishness. The empire's spirit, its core identity, was slowly being lost.
This cultural decline showed itself in many ways. Gladiator games became more violent. Emperors held expensive festivals just to win public support. The Senate, once a place for serious debate, became a group of yes-men who followed orders without question. Military leaders grew more powerful than the government itself. Rome was no longer being led by strong ideas. It was being driven by short-term survival.
It's also important to remember that Rome faced increasing pressure from outside its borders. Germanic tribes like the Visigoths and Vandals were becoming stronger. The Huns, a fierce group from Central Asia, were moving west. These groups didn't just want to invade. Many wanted to settle peacefully inside the empire. But Rome didn't know how to handle them. Some were accepted. Others were pushed away, creating anger and future enemies.
The empire's military was stretched too thin. With so many enemies, Rome needed more soldiers, but couldn't always find enough Roman citizens to serve. So they hired foreign soldiers, known as mercenaries. These fighters were paid to protect Rome, but they didn't always feel true loyalty to the empire. In battle, they might fight well, or they might run away if things got too difficult. Rome had traded loyalty for numbers.
The combination of a broken economy, weak leadership, military problems, and social division created a dangerous situation. Rome was still standing, but it was no longer stable. Every part of the empire was under pressure. And yet, many people inside the empire still believed that Rome would survive forever. They didn't see the fall coming, even as the ground beneath them began to shake.
When we study this period of decline, it teaches us a powerful lesson. Great civilizations don't fall overnight. They collapse slowly, piece by piece. The seeds of their destruction are often planted during their strongest times. The Roman Empire looked like it could last forever, but under the surface, it was preparing for collapse. A world that had once been full of power and progress was now entering an age of fear and confusion.
In the next section of our story, we'll look at one of the biggest changes in the empire's history, the decision to divide Rome into East and West. This choice was meant to bring control and peace, but instead, it made the empire weaker and easier to attack. We'll see how this division changed everything and opened the door for even more trouble.
History is full of warning signs, and Rome gave many. But people didn't always listen. Now, more than 1,500 years later, we can still learn from those mistakes. That's why we're telling this story, not just to remember the past, but to understand the present. As the Roman Empire faced growing troubles, one of the most important decisions in its history was made: the division of the empire into two parts. This choice was meant to help manage the vast lands and complex problems, but it also changed the future of Rome forever. To understand why this happened, we need to look at the challenges the empire faced and the ideas behind the split.
The empire had become too large for one person to rule effectively. Communication was slow, and threats came from many directions. Emperor Diocletian, who ruled in the late 3rd century AD, decided to divide power between two emperors. He created what was called the Tetrarchy, meaning rule of 4. Two emperors ruled the East and West, each with their own deputy, hoping this system would make governing easier.
Diocletian's reforms were bold. He reorganized the empire's administration, increased the army, and introduced new taxes. By sharing power, the emperors could respond faster to threats in their regions. The Eastern Empire, with its capital at Nicomedia, was wealthier and more stable. The Western Empire, based in Rome or later Ravenna, was more vulnerable and faced stronger barbarian attacks.
Later, Emperor Constantine made another important change. In 330 AD, he founded a new capital for the Eastern Empire, Constantinople, now modern-day Istanbul. This city was carefully chosen for its strategic location between Europe and Asia. It was heavily fortified and grew rich through trade. Constantinople became the New Rome, a center of power and culture for the eastern half.
The division brought some benefits at first. The two parts of the empire could focus on their own problems and share resources when needed. But it also created rivalry. The East and West sometimes competed for influence and wealth. The Eastern Empire grew stronger while the West weakened. Over time, their governments and cultures became different, even though they shared Roman traditions.
The Western Empire faced many difficulties. Its borders were under constant attack by tribes like the Visigoths and Vandals. Its economy was weaker, and political chaos increased. Many Western emperors were weak or controlled by powerful generals. The Eastern Empire, on the other hand, had more resources, better defenses, and a stronger economy, which helped it survive longer.
This division also changed how Rome itself was seen. While Rome was still a symbolic capital, real political power shifted to Constantinople. Many people in the West began to see Constantinople as the true center of the empire. Over centuries, the Eastern Empire, later called the Byzantine Empire, preserved Roman law and culture, even as the Western Empire declined and fell.
The division of the empire was a major turning point in world history. It meant that Rome was no longer united under one rule. This made the empire easier to attack and harder to defend. The West and East had different priorities, armies, and leaders. When the Western Empire fell in 476 AD, the Eastern Empire continued for nearly 1,000 more years.
While this split was meant to protect Rome, it also highlighted its weaknesses. It showed that the empire had grown too large to manage as one. It also showed that political solutions sometimes have unexpected consequences. The story of the Roman Empire's division helps us understand how difficult it is to govern large and diverse countries, a lesson still important today.
As the empire split, other problems didn't disappear. In fact, many grew worse. Barbarian invasions continued. Economic troubles deepened, social and political divisions became sharper. The Western Empire, once the heart of Roman power, struggled to survive. The decisions made to save the empire ended up speeding its fall in the West.
Next, we will explore the dramatic and violent invasions by barbarian tribes and how these attacks shattered the Western Roman Empire. From the Visigoths to the Vandals and Huns, these groups changed the course of history and marked the end of ancient Rome as it was known.
Understanding the division of the empire is key to understanding why Rome eventually fell. It was not just one event, but many choices and changes over time. History shows us how fragile even the greatest powers can be when facing internal division and external threats. This makes the story of Rome's fall all the more powerful and relevant.
As the Roman Empire faced growing internal troubles, it was also attacked from outside. These attacks came from groups we often call barbarians, but that word doesn't tell the full story. Many of these groups were strong, organized, and had their own cultures. The Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns were among the most famous. Their invasions shook the foundations of Rome and helped bring about the empire's fall.
The Visigoths were a Germanic tribe living beyond the empire's northern borders. For years they had conflicts with Rome, but also sometimes worked as allies or soldiers for the empire. However, as pressure grew from other groups, especially the Huns pushing westward, the Visigoths sought safety inside Roman lands. In 410 AD, under their leader Alaric, they famously sacked Rome, the first time in over 800 years that the city had been taken by a foreign army.
This sack of Rome shocked the world. Rome was still seen as the eternal city, the center of the world. For many Romans, it was a symbol of safety and power. Seeing it captured was like watching a great dream collapse. But the Visigoths were not just looting. They were also looking for a place to live and settle. The empire's borders were no longer secure, and Rome could no longer control who crossed them.
Following the Visigoths, other groups began invading Roman territory. The Vandals crossed into North Africa, a vital region for Rome's grain supply. In 455 AD, the Vandals captured Rome itself, taking riches and destroying buildings. The word vandalism even comes from this event, showing how deeply it affected people's memories. These attacks hurt Rome's economy and morale deeply.
Then came the Huns, a nomadic and fierce people from Central Asia. Led by the terrifying Attila, they moved into Eastern Europe in the 5th century. Attila was known as the Scourge of God because of his brutal raids. His armies destroyed cities and forced other tribes to flee into Roman lands. Many blame Attila for pushing tribes like the Visigoths into the empire, causing a chain reaction of invasions.
The Roman military was stretched too thin by this time. With so many enemies and few resources, defending every border was impossible. The empire hired mercenaries, including some of these barbarian groups, to help fight. But this strategy was risky. Mercenaries were loyal to money, not Rome. Sometimes they switched sides or caused trouble inside the empire itself.
The empire's weakening defenses also allowed tribes to settle inside Roman lands as federati, allied peoples who promised to defend borders in exchange for land. But this policy backfired when these groups gained power and stopped following Rome's orders. In some cases, they even fought against Rome, contributing to civil wars and further weakening the state.
The political instability in Rome itself made things worse. Weak emperors and civil wars distracted the government from real threats. Some leaders focused more on gaining power than protecting the empire. This allowed barbarian leaders to negotiate from positions of strength, often demanding lands and privileges in return for peace.
The fall of the Western Roman Empire is often dated to 476 AD, when the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was overthrown by the Germanic general Odoacer. This event marked the end of Roman political power in the West, although Roman culture and law continued to influence Europe for centuries. The Eastern Empire, centered in Constantinople, survived for many more years.
While the fall of Rome was tragic, it also led to new beginnings. Many of the barbarian leaders adopted Roman customs and laws. They helped shape medieval Europe. The blending of Roman and barbarian cultures created the foundation for modern European nations. So even in defeat, Rome's legacy lived on.
The story of the barbarian invasions teaches us that no empire, no matter how great, can ignore threats from outside or inside. It shows how complex the fall of Rome really was, a mix of military pressure, political failure, economic decline, and social change. Understanding these invasions helps us appreciate the challenges Rome faced in its final years.
In our next section, we will explore Rome's struggling economy, how money problems, trade decline, and taxation made it harder for the empire to survive. Money is often called the lifeblood of any empire, and for Rome, economic troubles were a silent but deadly enemy.
This story is a reminder that history is never simple. It is made of many parts, working together or against each other. The barbarian invasions were dramatic, but they were just one chapter in a long story of change, decline, and renewal. When we think about the fall of a great empire like Rome, many imagine armies clashing or leaders fighting for power. But behind the scenes, a silent enemy was slowly destroying the empire: economic troubles. Rome's economy was once the engine that powered its strength. However, by the later centuries, it was faltering. Problems with money, trade, and taxes made it harder for Rome to keep itself together.
Rome's economy was based on farming, trade, and slavery. For centuries, this system worked well. Farmers grew crops that fed cities. Traders brought goods from faraway lands. Slaves worked the fields and homes. But as invasions increased and political chaos grew, this system began to collapse. Farms were destroyed during wars. Trade routes became unsafe. Many small farmers lost their land.
One major problem was inflation. To pay for armies and government expenses, Rome began producing more coins with less precious metal inside them. This caused the value of money to fall. Prices went up, but people's incomes did not keep pace. The common people, especially, felt this squeeze. They had to pay more for food and goods, which made their lives harder.
Heavy taxes added to the burden. To fund the empire's growing expenses, the government raised taxes on farmers, merchants, and even the poor. Many people lost hope and stopped paying taxes. Landowners, trying to avoid taxes, sometimes abandoned their farms or hid their wealth. This led to less production and even less money flowing through the economy.
Trade also suffered. The Mediterranean Sea, once a busy highway for ships, became dangerous due to pirate attacks and enemy fleets. Roads were damaged or unsafe. Without trade, cities lost important goods and income. Many regions became isolated. The empire started to look more like a group of disconnected parts rather than a united whole.
Another important factor was Rome's reliance on slave labor. When the empire stopped expanding, fewer slaves were captured. This reduced the labor force for farms and businesses. Without new workers, productivity dropped. At the same time, fewer jobs were available for free citizens, increasing poverty and social unrest.
The economy's decline affected the military as well. Rome needed money to pay soldiers, buy weapons, and maintain defenses. As the treasury shrank, soldiers were paid less or went unpaid for months. This caused low morale and desertion. Some soldiers even joined barbarian groups or rebelled against their commanders.
The empire tried to fix economic problems with new laws and reforms, but these were often too little, too late. Diocletian and Constantine tried to control prices and taxes, but enforcement was difficult. Corruption was widespread, with local officials sometimes stealing tax money. The empire's financial system was weak and unreliable.
Economic decline also increased the gap between rich and poor. Wealthy landowners owned large estates and could protect their lands. Poor farmers and city workers struggled to survive. Many moved to cities looking for work but found overcrowded slums and little opportunity. This created social tension and instability.
In the end, the struggling economy was one of the empire's most serious problems. It weakened every part of Roman life: government, military, society, and culture. Without a strong economy, Rome could not support its armies, feed its people, or maintain its infrastructure. The empire's financial troubles were a major reason why it could not stop its fall.
Next, we will discuss the political chaos and corruption that followed economic troubles. Weak leaders, constant power struggles, and civil wars made Rome even more fragile. History shows that money problems can quickly become political problems, and when that happens, an empire faces real danger.
Understanding Rome's economic struggles helps us see how important a healthy economy is for any nation. It reminds us that wealth alone does not guarantee power or safety. Empires, like people, need careful management of resources and fairness to survive.
As Rome's economy struggled, another challenge was growing stronger: political chaos. The empire was supposed to be ruled by strong and wise leaders, but in its later years, leadership became unstable. Emperors came and went quickly, many of them chosen by the army or powerful groups rather than by law or merit. This constant change made it difficult for Rome to solve its many problems.
After the death of Marcus Aurelius, Rome entered a time of turmoil known as the crisis of the 3rd century. During this period, more than 20 emperors ruled in less than 50 years. Many were assassinated or overthrown by rivals. Civil wars broke out as generals fought each other for power. The empire was divided, and each leader focused on holding onto their throne rather than governing well.
The Praetorian Guard, originally created to protect the emperor, became a powerful political force. They often influenced who became emperor by supporting or killing candidates. This turned the imperial office into a prize fought over by military leaders, not a position of responsible governance. The empire's political system was breaking down, and corruption spread through the government.
Corruption became a serious problem. Officials and governors abused their power to enrich themselves. Taxes were collected unfairly, and local leaders ignored the needs of ordinary people. Justice was often bought or denied, which weakened trust in the empire's institutions. As trust fell, people became more disillusioned with their rulers and the empire's future.
The instability also made Rome vulnerable to outside enemies. When civil wars distracted the government, borders were left unprotected. Barbarian tribes took advantage of this weakness, increasing their attacks. Instead of working together to defend the empire, rival factions within Rome fought for control, making the empire weaker day by day.
Sometimes military leaders seized power by force, declaring themselves emperor. These usurpers often lacked support from the people or the Senate. Their short and violent rules added to the chaos. Rome's political culture had shifted from cooperation to competition and violence. The government became a battlefield instead of a place for leadership.
This political chaos affected every part of Roman society. People living in the provinces felt abandoned by distant and corrupt rulers. Soldiers grew tired of serving leaders who might not protect them or pay them. The Senate, once an important political body, became powerless or controlled by the emperor's favorites.
In this environment, loyalty was fragile. Alliances changed quickly, and trust was rare. Civil wars drained resources and divided the empire's people. The constant threat of assassination and rebellion created fear and uncertainty. Rome's political foundation, once strong and respected, was crumbling.
Despite these problems, some emperors tried to bring order. Diocletian and Constantine introduced reforms to stabilize the government and economy. They strengthened the military and reorganized the empire's administration. However, these changes could not fix the deep-rooted issues caused by years of corruption and conflict.
By the time the Western Roman Empire was in its final days, political chaos had become one of its biggest enemies. Without stable leadership, it was impossible to solve the empire's many crises. The empire's fall was not just because of external attacks, but because the government itself was failing.
This part of history reminds us how important good leadership is for any country. When corruption and power struggles take over, even the strongest nations can become weak. Rome's political chaos teaches us that unity, trust, and justice are vital for survival.
Next, we will explore how cultural and moral decline contributed to the empire's fall. Changes in values and social attitudes also played a role in weakening Rome from within. These changes affected how people saw themselves and their responsibilities to the empire.
Understanding Rome's political problems helps us see the full picture of why this great empire could not last. It wasn't just one factor, but many working together, economic, military, political, and cultural, that brought about the fall. As we have seen, the Roman Empire was facing economic troubles and political chaos. But there was also a deeper problem, a change in the culture and values of Roman society. Over time, many Romans lost their sense of unity, discipline, and responsibility. The strong spirit that had built and held the empire together began to fade, weakening Rome from within.
Roman society was built on certain values like duty, honor, courage, and loyalty to the state. These values encouraged people to work hard, respect laws, and support the empire's needs. However, as wealth grew and life became more comfortable for some, people's focus shifted from public service to personal pleasure. Luxury and entertainment became more important than responsibility.
The games in the Colosseum, for example, were not just sports events. They were meant to show Roman strength and unity. But over time, they became violent and cruel spectacles focused on entertainment rather than meaning. Gladiators fought to the death, and large crowds gathered to watch. These games distracted people from real problems and weakened social bonds.
The family structure also changed. Traditional Roman families valued discipline and education. Fathers were authority figures who taught their children to be good citizens and soldiers. But by the later years of the empire, family life was less stable. Divorce and neglect became more common. This weakened the passing down of values and patriotism.
Religion also played a role in cultural change. The rise of Christianity brought new beliefs and values that sometimes conflicted with traditional Roman religion. Some people found hope and community in the new faith, but others saw it as a threat to old customs. The empire's shift from polytheism to Christianity changed many social and political relationships.
Some historians believe this religious change weakened the old Roman spirit of conquest and discipline. Others argue that Christianity helped preserve Roman culture by providing a new source of unity and moral guidance. Either way, this shift marked a significant transformation in how Romans saw themselves and their empire.
The decline in public morality also showed in corruption, crime, and loss of respect for authority. Cities became overcrowded and dirty. Crime rates increased, and law enforcement was weak. People often looked out for themselves instead of their communities. This lack of social cohesion made it harder for Rome to respond to its many crises.
Education and the arts also suffered. With political instability and economic troubles, funding for schools and cultural institutions decreased. Many Romans became less interested in philosophy, literature, and history. This intellectual decline reduced the ability of leaders and citizens to think clearly and solve problems.
The weakening of civic pride and participation meant fewer people wanted to serve in the army or government. Recruitment became difficult, and the quality of leadership declined. The empire's institutions, once strong and respected, lost power and effectiveness.
This cultural and moral decline was not the only cause of Rome's fall, but it was an important part of the story. When a society loses its shared values and sense of purpose, it becomes vulnerable to internal and external pressures.
Rome's experience shows us that maintaining a strong society requires more than wealth and power. It needs commitment, shared values, and active participation from its citizens. Without these, even the greatest empire can weaken and fall.
In the next section, we will look at how the Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued after the fall of the West. While the Western Empire fell, the East preserved many Roman traditions and lasted for another 1,000 years.
Understanding cultural decline helps us see the full picture of Rome's fall, a story of many layers, where political, economic, military, and social changes all combined. It reminds us that history is complex and that lessons from the past are still important today. While the Western Roman Empire was crumbling under pressure, the eastern half of the empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for many centuries. This part of the empire was centered around its capital, Constantinople. Unlike the West, the East was wealthier, better defended, and politically more stable. This allowed it to survive long after Rome fell.
Constantinople was a magnificent city, located strategically between Europe and Asia. Its position on the Bosporus Strait made it a major center for trade and defense. The city was surrounded by strong walls and had a powerful navy to protect it from attacks. These defenses helped the Byzantine Empire resist invasions that destroyed the West.
The Byzantine Empire preserved many Roman laws, traditions, and culture. Emperor Justinian, who ruled in the 6th century, is famous for organizing Roman laws into a clear system called the Corpus Juris Civilis, or body of civil law. This legal code became the foundation for many modern legal systems in Europe.
The Byzantine Empire was also a center for art, architecture, and religion. The Hagia Sophia, built under Justinian, was an architectural masterpiece with its huge dome and beautiful mosaics. Christianity was the official religion, and the Orthodox Church played a major role in society and politics.
While the Byzantine Empire faced its own challenges, including wars with Persians, Arabs, and later Turks, it adapted and survived for nearly 1,000 years after the fall of the Western Empire. Its history is a story of resilience and transformation, showing how Roman legacy continued in new forms.
Understanding the survival of the Eastern Roman Empire helps us see that the fall of Rome was not the end of Roman culture or influence. Instead, it evolved and spread in different ways. The Byzantine Empire kept alive many ideas, laws, and traditions that still affect us today.
As we conclude our story in the next section, we will reflect on the lessons of Rome's rise and fall, a powerful story about human achievement, weakness, and the passage of time. Rome's story remains relevant because it teaches us about the challenges all civilizations face.
History is a mirror, showing us the successes and failures of the past. By studying Rome, we learn about leadership, unity, culture, and resilience. We also learn that no empire lasts forever, but the ideas and lessons they leave behind can continue to inspire.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise and fall of one of the greatest empires in history. Stay curious, and remember, every story has more to teach us than just facts. It helps us understand ourselves and our world. As we reflect on everything we've discussed in this series, the military defeats, the barbarian invasions, the political chaos, the economic instability, the cultural shifts, a question naturally comes to mind. Could the fall of the Roman Empire have been prevented? Was it an unstoppable fate sealed by time and history? Or could different decisions, better leadership, and stronger unity have changed the outcome? That's what we want to explore in this final bonus section of the podcast.
It's a fascinating question, Adam. History often feels like a straight line in hindsight, but when you look closer, you realize that every event was the result of choices, some wise, some foolish, and many made under pressure. Rome didn't fall overnight. It collapsed slowly, over centuries. That means there were moments, crossroads, where different decisions might have changed the course of history.
Absolutely. Let's start with leadership. One of the most damaging features of Rome's later years was the lack of strong and consistent leadership. Emperors were frequently overthrown, assassinated, or manipulated by the military. If Rome had managed to create a stable system of succession, where capable and ethical leaders were trained and appointed, that alone might have delayed or prevented the empire's collapse. The rise of military emperors, civil wars, and the Praetorian Guard's influence all contributed to the empire's vulnerability.
Yes, strong institutions matter. If the Roman Senate had been more empowered and less corrupt, or if local governors had more autonomy with accountability, the empire could have functioned more efficiently. Decentralized governance might have actually helped Rome govern its massive territory better, especially as communication over long distances became difficult. But instead, power was often centralized in a fragile way, leading to mismanagement and rebellion.
Economically, there were warning signs. Inflation was a major problem, caused in part by Rome devaluing its currency to fund military campaigns and public spending. If more responsible fiscal policies had been introduced earlier, perhaps under emperors like Commodus or Caracalla, then the collapse of trade and agriculture could have been avoided or reduced. Rome might have found ways to encourage innovation in farming, reduce reliance on slavery, and increase productivity through incentives.
That's a great point. And don't forget about taxation. The burden on the lower classes was extreme. Wealthy landowners often avoided taxes, while ordinary citizens and farmers were squeezed until they had nothing left. Many even abandoned their land. If the tax system had been reformed to be fairer and more balanced, local economies could have remained healthier and more self-sufficient. That would have helped Rome maintain its military and civil services without creating resentment among its people.
Another missed opportunity was how the empire dealt with the so-called barbarians. Not all of these tribes were enemies. Some, like the Visigoths and Franks, were willing to settle peacefully within the empire's borders in exchange for land and protection. Had Rome treated them with more respect and integrated them into society, they could have become allies rather than invaders. Instead, Rome often exploited or betrayed them, which led to rebellions and eventual invasions.
The handling of the Goths in particular stands out. The massacre of Gothic families at the hands of Roman officials in the late 4th century was a major turning point. It sparked the anger that eventually led to the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD, where the Roman army suffered a devastating defeat. Imagine if Rome had built trust and offered citizenship, education, and military training. These groups might have become loyal defenders of the empire.
And let's not forget about culture and education. One of the reasons Rome thrived in its early centuries was its strong civic identity. People felt proud to be Roman. They served in the army, participated in politics, and contributed to public life. But over time, that identity faded. If more investment had been made in public education and the promotion of Roman values, duty, discipline, responsibility, then perhaps the citizens of the later empire would have been better equipped to face hard times.
Religious transformation also had its impact. The transition from pagan traditions to Christianity reshaped Roman identity. While Christianity helped preserve morality and unity in some ways, it also created tension and division at times. What if the empire had found a more peaceful, inclusive way to blend the two worlds? Maybe fewer internal conflicts would have occurred, and more energy could have gone into defending and reforming the empire instead.
And what about military reform? Rome's army had grown too dependent on foreign mercenaries by the 4th and 5th centuries. These soldiers often had little loyalty to Rome. If earlier reforms had focused on training Roman citizens, improving soldier pay and benefits, and rotating troops more effectively, the empire might have kept a stronger, more reliable military force.
So many possibilities. And while it's true that every empire has its limits, we must also admit that Rome had the knowledge, resources and legacy to possibly survive longer. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, did exactly that. Through adaptation, diplomacy and reform, it lasted for nearly 1,000 years after the fall of the West. That shows us it wasn't impossible.
So could the fall of the Roman Empire have been prevented? It's hard to say for sure. Maybe not forever, but it absolutely could have been delayed, maybe by centuries. Better governance, fairer laws, stronger leadership, and smarter diplomacy might have changed the course of history. But because those lessons weren't learned in time, Rome slowly collapsed under its own weight.
And that's one of the great values of studying history. It allows us to see not just what happened, but what could have happened. It reminds us that the choices we make today, as individuals, leaders, or communities, shape the future in powerful ways. No fall is inevitable if wisdom, courage, and cooperation are present.
Exactly. And that's why the story of Rome is more than just ancient history. It's a mirror we hold up to our own world. It challenges us to think about how we govern, how we educate, how we protect unity, and how we respond to change. Because if Rome, the mighty empire that ruled for centuries, could fall, then no society is immune. But the more we learn, the better prepared we are.
We hope this bonus section has given you more to think about. If you've listened this far, thank you for being part of the English Globe family. We would love to hear your thoughts. Could the fall of the Roman Empire have been prevented? Let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what your opinion is on this powerful chapter of history.
As we come to the end of our exploration of the Roman Empire's rise and fall, it's important to reflect on the many lessons this great civilization offers us. Rome's story is not just about battles, emperors, or architecture. It is about human nature, the strengths and weaknesses that all societies share. It reminds us how power, when not balanced with wisdom and care, can be fragile.
The Roman Empire teaches us that no matter how strong or advanced a society becomes, it must constantly adapt to change. Rome's fall wasn't sudden. It was the result of many small failures: economic troubles, political chaos, social division, and external pressures. Each one alone might have been overcome, but together they formed a perfect storm.
One key lesson is the importance of unity. When people feel connected by shared values and trust their leaders, a society can face challenges together. But when divisions grow, whether between rich and poor, rulers and citizens, or different regions, weakness grows. Rome's decline shows us what happens when unity breaks down.
Leadership is another vital factor. Rome's greatest successes often came under strong, wise emperors who worked for the good of the whole. But in its later years, leadership became unstable and self-serving. Without capable leaders who act with vision and integrity, even the greatest empires struggle to survive.
We also see how important it is to manage resources wisely. Rome's economy suffered from inflation, heavy taxation, and loss of productivity. This made it hard to support armies, build infrastructure, and maintain public services. Sustainable management of resources is essential for any society's longevity.
Cultural strength and shared values are the glue that holds people together. When those begin to fade, when people lose a sense of duty, pride, or community, society becomes vulnerable. Rome's moral and cultural decline weakened its ability to respond to crises and maintain social order.
Finally, history reminds us that external threats often take advantage of internal weaknesses. Rome's enemies were powerful, but many of the empire's problems came from inside: division, corruption, and poor governance. This lesson is timeless. No nation or organization can afford to ignore its internal health.
While the Roman Empire as a political entity ended over 1,500 years ago, its influence lives on. From law to language, architecture to religion, the legacy of Rome shapes our modern world in many ways. Its story is a powerful reminder that civilizations rise and fall, but their ideas can continue to inspire.
Thank you for joining us on this deep journey through one of history's most fascinating stories. We hope it has helped you understand not only the past, but also the timeless challenges of leadership, society, and human nature.
Keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, every chapter in history offers lessons for today. We look forward to bringing you more stories from the past here on the English Globe.